Dale Little here at Rescue American Ministries, and in my outdoor studio today, so you may hear a little traffic coming by. Just want to take just a few minutes of time. I'm going to read a few verses here and give you a little history lesson. And I'll start in John chapter 3, verse 16, and read through 21. It says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. He that believeth on him is not condemned, but he that believeth not is condemned already, because he hath not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. And this is the condemnation," listen, "that light is come into the world, and men loved darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone that doeth evil hateth the light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deeds should be reproved. But he that doeth truth cometh to the light, that his deeds may be made manifest, that they are wrought in God." You know, we're living in a day when, of course, the church has lost its, influence to a great degree here in America, and as well as other places somewhat. And part of it is, our doing. We've got so weak. America has become weak. We no longer have the will to win a war, it doesn't seem like. I mean, Grenada, the last little war we had, I think I can remember, and that was the only one since World War II that we had the courage and the determination to win a victory. I mean, a real victory when it was really needed. Because there's two cultures in this world primarily. There's good and there's evil. Now, you can, deny that all you want to. And there are those within the church today that say, well, there's no difference, and one country is no better than another country. One nation is no better. One culture is no better. Well, I beg to differ with you. You want to live with a tribe of headhunters where you don't know if your head's going to be cut off the next day, or you're going to be, and war is a way of life? Or would you rather live in something like I've grown up in here in America? No, it's not perfect, never has been perfect, never will be perfect. But you can't tell me there's not a big difference. If you happen to be African American or black, however you want to describe yourself, some of you, and I have some wonderful friends, but there's some out there that feel like they are actually superior. They've got pride coming up now. We've heard the term black pride. The Bible says pride goes before a fall. It's all right to a degree. It depends on what kind of pride you're talking about. But when you start feeling like you're better than everybody else, it's the same problem that my people had, as far as if you want to go talk about white Europeans. That yes, no doubt, one time that was the belief that we were, superior to everybody else. Maybe not to the extent that Hitler did. We would, he wanted to eliminate everybody else and create a superior race. No, but just felt like we were above the others. And now we have others coming up that feel like they're that way. Well, if you go to Africa today, and you can, if you want to criticize America for slavery, and the criticism is just, I mean, it's there, but that's been, a few years ago. But if you look in Africa, it's still going on. The Bantu in 2013, as late as 2013, I really don't like bringing this up, but it needs to be said because of the critical race theory has been taught in the schools and things now. But there was a group of the Pygmies in Central Africa had to go to the United Nations and ask them to kind of somehow intervene to stop the Bantu tribes from cannibalizing them. And the Bantu claimed, and they made slaves of them. The Bantu tribe claimed that the Pygmies were only half human. We've heard that before. So let's get away from that and move on now. we're living in a world of different cultures. There's good and there's evil. And none of us are immune to it as far as races go, as far as ethnicity goes. We're all subject to that. But culturally, don't tell me that the Christian faith, that the Christian lifestyle is not superior to anything else this world has to offer, because it's headed by Jesus Christ. And if you don't think so and you call yourself a Christian, something's sadly wrong somewhere. I mean, why are you a Christian if you believe that? If you believe it's no better than anything else, why are you even a Christian? Why would you even want to be a part of it? Beats me. Anyway, let's go on. Now, where I'm going is this, is with Hamas and Israel now. Let's look at history. A lot of people already forgot about Yasser Arafat. Yasser Arafat was born in Egypt of Palestinian parents, but they lived in Egypt, never lived in the area called Palestine. Lived in Egypt. He was born in Egypt. But when Israel became a nation, then Yasser Arafat took up and fought on the side of the Muslim Brotherhood to try to keep the Jews from establishing a nation. Well, they failed there, but then later on in the late 1950s, Yasser Arafat founded the Palestinian Liberation Organization, I believe it was, and PLO, a terrorist organization. Rained terror, just like Hamas has recently. Rained terror, bombings, and whatever else, just killing civilians any way they could to cause death to any Israelis that they could. Now, finally, they kept all the Arab nations around and the Muslim nations surrounding Israel, kept things stirred up with the Palestinians. Well, Israel ought to give them a homeland. They ought to give up some land. Well, why don't they give up some land? They're right there surrounding Israel. Why don't each one of those Muslim nations? Because they don't want them either. And so eventually, and the reason they didn't want them, because for one thing, they were enemies to all of them. The Palestinians go all the way back to the Philistines that Israel fought as the Philistines tried to take the land that God had promised to Abraham and his descendants through Isaac. Okay, now let's move on. 1950, late 1950s, Yasser Arafat founded that organization. Reign of terror. Had an army followed him. Finally, the nations were allowed to let loose, and why? It didn't happen sooner. I don't remember what year it finally happened, but eventually the PLO was forced to disarm. Lebanon, being a primarily Christian nation, mostly Mennonite Christians, felt like they would be doing a godly service by allowing the Palestinians to come in and relocate there if they gave up their arms, which they did for a short while. Of course, later on, the arms started flowing back in, and the Muslims, the Palestinians, they ended up destroying that country of Lebanon. It's nothing. It used to be one of the most beautiful countries. Beirut used to be a beautiful city. They just destroyed it. So then, the PLO fell by the wayside eventually. And so now what are the Palestinians going to do? Well, they found themselves another, quote, hitman. And that's exactly what Hamas is. Nothing but a hitman for the Palestinians. The Palestinians voted for Hamas to take control of Gaza. And Gaza Israel took it after one of the wars where all its neighbors came against them, tried to defeat them. And they took some of that land and used it for a buffer zone. But under pressure from the United States and others, they gave Gaza up to the Palestinians. Now, the Arab nations would give up any land, and the Palestinians wouldn't take it if they did, because they don't quite hate those nations like they do Israel. They're still looking for its destruction. So you bring us up to the day when people are beginning to feel sorry for the Palestinians. Well, I do feel sorry for the children, but where was the outcry from these Palestinians? Where were their tears to see what the atrocities they did to Israel, to the Israeli citizens, the babies that they cut their heads off, and what they did to the women and children? Where was the outcry? There has been none that I've seen, none that I've heard. Oh, the only outcry was when it came home to them. As we say here in the farming community sometimes, when the chickens come home to roost. Yeah, that's when they begin their wailing and outcry. I had to work, unfortunately, or fortunately, either way you want to look at it. It did provide me a job, provided me a living. I worked as a correctional officer and correctional sergeant as a retired later. And I remember one incident, we had an inmate that came into my office when I was a sergeant. And it caused a disruption, and we ended up in an altercation right there in my sergeant's office. Myself and another officer, one of my officers rather, got it under control. And he was there, just cussing and calling us all kinds of names. Ended up biting my officer. And then just as soon as the lieutenant, finally got cuffs on him. I called the lieutenant, and the lieutenant comes in. All of a sudden he starts bawling and just crying, "Oh, I'm sorry, Yeah, he wasn't sorry until the lieutenant came in, because he knew, where he was going then, to segregation. But up until then, no sorrow. Same way with the Palestinians. Now, we are too soft. The American church is too soft on the culture, on the sin, I know we're supposed to love the individual, and it is my prayer that, first of all, that God change hearts. There's two things God can do to change our enemies and do away with our enemies. And one is, the physical, wipe them out. The other is to change your heart. I'd always prefer that, and I know that's God's will, is always to change your heart, but that's not going to happen that often with some of these people. And I'm not just talking about Palestinians. I'm talking about we're living in a world that still, just like in the day of Jesus, just like when John wrote his gospel, and this is the condemnation, that light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil. When are we going to get to understand that? And quit feeling sorry. It's Israel's problems stem primarily because they never did what God told them to do. He told them to get rid of the evil people that were in that area, what a lot of people call Palestine. It's never been Palestine except under the Romans. That was a designation they gave to it. But that area of the world in the Middle East there, that Israel occupies, God gave that to them because of the wickedness of the people that occupied it at the time. And he gave them plenty of time. I think something like 400 years maybe. Because he said that Israel spent about that length of time, I think it was, in Egypt, waiting for that day, when finally God said, okay, their sin is full. In other words, he was still treating them with some mercy and giving them a chance to repent, turn, up until that time. And finally he said, okay, their time is up. This land belongs to Israel now. They were putting their children in the arms of a idol that had hollowed out and a fire built in it. outstretched arms, and people put their children, laid their little babies in the arms of those red-hot idols and burned them to death. People say, well, how could God tell Israel to wipe out all this? That's why. Because that's the type of people they were. And people say, well, why don't God do something about all these? That He asked us to. He asked the Israelites to, and I'm not saying no. I'm not suggesting we go out and start killing people. But I'm saying when war happens, we need to have the fortitude to do what has to be done, that righteousness will prevail, because the enemy is just the opposite. The enemy is just the opposite. They hate the church. They hate the light. We need to understand that. And the sooner we do, but I'm afraid now it's almost too late. I honestly do, but I hope not, and I pray not. But enough for today. Just a little history lesson. The Palestinians are not without guilt. It's not just Hamas. Hamas was their, in a sense, hitman. Or if you wanted to put it another way, Hamas was their pit bull that they turned loose on Israel. Okay? That's the true history. I've been around a while. I've seen it. Dale Little, Rescue American Ministries.